I drove 40 minutes to downtown that morning with a box of bakery donuts on the passenger seat, the kind my son had liked since he was 9 years old. Maple glaze, not the chocolate ones everybody else wants. I was ready to celebrate. Andre had called me 3 days earlier, his voice bright in a way I hadn't heard in over a year. "Dad, Reginald finally came through. Director of Acquisitions, I'm running the whole Eastern portfolio." I sat in my kitchen and felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for a very long time. My boy, my hard-working, patient boy, was finally getting his shot. So I put on my good navy blazer, the one I've had since my daughter's graduation, a little loose at the shoulders now, and I drove downtown to surprise him. The Ashcroft Group occupied the top 6 floors of a glass building on Peachtree. Reginald Ashcroft had built his real estate empire the old-fashioned way, inheriting money from his father and calling it self-made. I'd met the man twice. Both times he'd looked at me the way you look at a receipt you didn't ask for. My son had married his daughter Sylvia 4 years ago in a ceremony where Reginald spent $180,000 and made sure to seat my side of the family on folding chairs because the upholstered ones had run out. I walked into the lobby holding my donut box like a fool. The receptionist looked up and took in my blazer, my gray slacks, my scuffed shoes, and decided I was a delivery driver. "Deliveries go around back," she said, not unkindly, but not kindly either. "I'm here to see my son Andre. He's the new director of acquisitions." She tapped something into her computer, then tapped again. "I don't see a director of acquisitions by that name," she scrolled. "I do have an Andre listed under facilities services." I felt the donut box get heavier. "Could you point me toward facilities?" I asked. She pointed to a door marked maintenance, down a side hallway past the mailroom. I walked through it. The hallway smelled of industrial cleaner, concrete floors, fluorescent lights, the hum of a ventilation system doing its job. I followed the sound of voices and came out into the building's underground parking structure, cool and dim, 36 luxury cars sitting in their spots like they owned the place, which in a way they did. And there was my son. He was in a gray coverall with the Ashcroft logo on the chest. He was polishing the hood of a black Mercedes G-Wagon with a chamois cloth, moving in careful circles, his shoulders hunched like he was trying to make himself smaller than he was. Standing 10 feet away, watching him, was Reginald Ashcroft in what I later learned was a $6,000 suit, a coffee in one hand, his phone in the other. Next to Reginald, my daughter-in-law leaned against a concrete pillar, scrolling through her phone. "You missed a spot by the mirror, bud," Reginald said, pointing without looking up from his screen. My son went back to the mirror. "You know what I love about this arrangement?" Reginald said to my daughter-in-law, loud enough for the whole garage to hear. "He's thorough. It's in the blood. You can take the man out of the neighborhood, but you can't take the neighborhood out of the man." He laughed. It was the laugh of a man who had never been told no. My daughter-in-law smiled into her phone. "Daddy, you're terrible," she said, which was not the same thing as saying he was wrong. I stood at the edge of the parking structure with my maple glazed donuts and watched my son polish a car he would never be allowed to drive. He looked up. He saw me. I will carry the look on his face for the rest of my life. It wasn't shame, exactly. It was something worse. It was apology. Like he was the one who had done something wrong to me. He pressed his lips together, shook his head once, and mouthed, "Please, Dad, go." I turned around. I walked back through the maintenance hallway, past the mailroom, through the lobby, and out the revolving door. I stood on the sidewalk. Atlanta traffic roared around me. The morning sun was already turning brutal. I set the donut box on top of a newspaper stand. Someone would want them. Then I reached in the inside pocket of my blazer and took out my phone, not the one I used for family calls. The other one, matte black, no case. I dialed. "This is Renita," my attorney answered on the second ring. "It's Floyd," I said. "Start the clock on the Meridian file." A pause. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." That triggers the ground lease recall and the escrow acceleration. The Ashcroft building sits on Mercer Meridian land, Floyd. "We're talking about—" "I know what we're talking about," I said. "I wrote the lease." "Okay," Renita said. "Clock starts now." I hung up. I looked at the glass tower that caught the morning light and threw it back like it was worth something. Reginald Ashcroft had called my son a neighborhood dog, said it in front of his daughter, in front of his employees, in my son's own workplace. There is a patience that comes from building something real over a very long time. I had been patient for 30 years. That patience had officially expired. My name is Floyd Mercer. I am 58 years old. For 22 years I worked as a property assessor for the city of Atlanta. One of those men who shows up with a clipboard and a camera and documents the bones of buildings, the rot behind the drywall, the water damage hiding under the tile. People look through you at parties when you say what you do. What they don't know is that I spent those 22 years watching the same 6 property defects get missed by the same inadequate software over and over again. So I built something better. In my garage on weekends between my son's Little League games and my wife's chemotherapy appointments. I patented an automated property condition scoring algorithm in 2007. In 2011, Fannie Mae licensed it. In 2013, 3 major insurance underwriters followed. Today, that algorithm runs inside the assessment systems used for more than 2 million residential and commercial properties a year across the Southeast. I receive a royalty on each one. I live in the same house I bought in 1998. I drive a 2019 Camry. The balance on my primary investment account is not something I discuss at dinner, but it would not fit inside Reginald Ashcroft's mental image of me. He saw a man in a worn blazer carrying donuts. He thought he understood everything there was to know. I met my son at a diner in Decatur an hour later. He came in still wearing the coverall, head low shoulders, carrying the geometry of a man who had learned to take up less space. He slid into the booth across from me and looked at his hands. "There was never a director of acquisitions position," he said. He didn't say it like a revelation. He said it like he was reading a diagnosis he'd already half expected. "Reginald called me into his office 2 weeks ago and said he had a role for me. Director of Acquisitions, Eastern Portfolio, full benefits, company car. When I showed up Monday morning, he handed me a facilities supervisor agreement. Minimum wage base, renewable monthly at his discretion. Benefits contingent on completing a 6-month probationary period. And you stayed." He looked up at me. His eyes were red at the rims. "Sylvia's doctor put her on modified activity restrictions last month. Blood pressure. The insurance through my old job ran out when I left the firm to take this position. Reginald's company policy covers her. If I walk out, if I create what he called a disruption, the coverage lapses in 30 days. He pressed his hands flat on the table. "She's pregnant, Dad. I'm not walking out when my wife is pregnant." I looked at my son. He was 31 years old. He had a finance degree from Georgia State. He had managed a commercial lease portfolio worth $40 million at his last firm. He was polishing Reginald Ashcroft's cars. "Tell me about the pregnancy," I said. He looked confused. "What do you mean?" "Which hospital? Which doctor?" "Northside. Dr. Kim, I think. Sylvia handles the appointments herself. She says she doesn't want me stressed about it." I filed that away. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and something shifted in his face, the way a man looks when he's learned to brace. "It's Sylvia," he answered and put it on speaker. "Where are you?" Not a question, a demand. "Grabbing coffee. I'll be back in." "Your father showed up at the building, Andre. Reginald called me. What is he doing there?" "He came to surprise me. I didn't know." He embarrassed me, walking in looking like, "It doesn't matter. Tell him to stay away. This is my father's workplace." A brief silence. "I need you back by 6. Daddy's having people over and you need to park the cars." She hung up. My son sat there with the phone face down on the table. I reached into my pocket and took out a debit card from a local credit union, the plastic worn and peeling at one corner. I slid it across. "Take it. There's enough for a good hotel tonight. Don't go back to that house." He picked up the card. He looked at it for a long moment and I could see him calculating, adding up what he thought I made, what he thought I had, what he thought he could take without taking too much. "Dad," he said, and his voice broke on the word. "I know you're trying to help, but you're on a fixed income. I'm not taking your grocery money." He opened his wallet. He had 3 20s and some ones. He peeled off a 20 and put it on my side of the table. "Here. I know your water heater's been giving you trouble. Get a plumber out." I looked at the 20. I looked at my son, who had spent months making himself small inside someone else's cruelty, who was sitting here with everything he had left and trying to give it to me. "Keep it," I said. "Keep your head up. I'm going to take care of this." "Dad, if Reginald gets upset." "I heard you," I said. "I won't touch the insurance." That much was true. What I was going to touch was everything else. The next morning I drove to Buckhead. I am not proud of what I did next, but I spent 22 years assessing properties, learning that the only way to understand what something really is to look at it when nobody's performing for you. Sylvia's modified activity restrictions did not appear to apply to Phipps Plaza. I found her at the mall at 11 in the morning, walking at a perfectly steady pace through Nordstrom, carrying shopping bags in both hands, her heels clicking on the tile, on the phone, laughing, not waddling, not short of breath, not even close. I sat near the fountain and filmed 12 minutes on my phone. I filmed her carrying bags. I filmed her eating a full lunch at the restaurant inside the mall, sitting upright, no discomfort, her 2 friends refilling her wine glass without hesitation. I filmed the timestamp on my screen and the business card she left on the table when she paid. Buckhead Premier OB-GYN, a name I recognized from what my son had told me. That afternoon I called Renita. "Pull whatever you can on a Dr. Christine Kim at Buckhead Premier OB-GYN, specifically any connection to the Ashcroft family." Renita called back in 4 hours. "The clinic's building is owned by a commercial LLC. That LLC traces back through 2 shell companies to Ashcroft Group Holdings." Reginald owned the building where the doctor practiced. He had trapped my son not just financially but medically, through a physician whose lease he controlled. The pregnancy might have been real. The danger, the restrictions, the urgency, manufactured, calibrated precisely to Andre's sense of obligation. He had found the most decent thing about my son and used it as a lock. Buy the clinic building, I told Renita. Floyd, what's market? Around 4.2 million. Offer 4.8, close by Friday. Reginald's annual charity gala was the following Saturday. The Ashcroft Foundation, a tax shelter dressed up as community goodwill, held it every year at the Georgian Terrace Hotel downtown. Black tie, $500 a plate. Politicians and developers and the kind of men who call themselves builders while their tenants pay rent to them. This year's theme was Building Atlanta's Future, which I found appropriate. My son called Thursday night. Reginald wants me to work the event, he said. He sounded hollow. Coat check and valet. He said it would be a good opportunity to show his partners my work ethic. A pause. He also said you could come, his words. Tell your father there's a spot at the caterer's table if he wants to watch. I thought about that for a moment. Tell him I'll be there, I said, and tell him I said thank you. Dad, please don't. Please just let me get through the 6 months. I'll see you Saturday, I said. My tailor works out of a shop on Auburn Avenue and has been cutting my clothes since I had money worth cutting clothes for. I called him Thursday. He had a suit ready by Friday afternoon. Charcoal wool, double-breasted, cut close, black shirt, silver tie. My good shoes, resoled twice, shined until they caught the light. Renita met me at the hotel entrance at 7:45. Ground lease recall is filed, she said, handing me a briefcase. Clause 11B, conduct materially damaging to third-party lessees. Documentation is airtight. She paused. The clinic building closed this afternoon. We're the landlord. And the commercial loan, SunTrust was happy to offload it after our due diligence questions started piling up. 2.8 million, callable on 60 days' notice. I straightened my tie, then let's go be hospitable. The Georgian Terrace ballroom was everything Reginald was, expensive and convinced of its own importance. I walked in and heads turned the way they do when someone enters a room with the wrong kind of confidence, the kind that doesn't check whether it's welcome. I found my son near the coat check, in a short catering jacket that fit him badly and suited him not at all. He looked at my suit like he was seeing something he couldn't quite place. Not yet, I said quietly. Keep doing what you're doing, it's almost over. Reginald found me 30 seconds later. He'd been watching the door. Floyd, he said my name like he was picking it up with 2 fingers. Didn't think you'd actually show? Wouldn't miss it. He looked at my suit. Something moved behind his eyes, confusion, then the arrogance reasserting itself because that's what arrogance does when it gets confused. He steered me toward a group of men by the bar. Gentlemen, this is Floyd. He's Andre's father. Property assessment. The pause he left after those words carried everything he meant it to carry. The men smiled politely and turned back to their drinks. Reginald leaned close. I want you to see what Andre's life could look like if he accepts his role here, he said quietly. There's nothing wrong with honest work, Floyd. Your family has always understood that. I looked at him, a man who had inherited $17 million and spent 40 years believing the inheritance made him exceptional. Reginald, I said, I'd like to say a few words to your guests before dinner. He blinked, then he smiled. He thought it was a joke. Then he decided it might be entertaining. 2 minutes, he said, courtesy of the family. He didn't know he was handing me the room. I walked to the podium at 8:15. When the drinks had been flowing long enough for people to feel comfortable and for Reginald to feel untouchable. My name is Floyd Mercer, I said. Most of you don't know me. That's by design. I gave that a moment to settle. 22 years ago, I was a city property assessor. I made $44,000 a year and drove a truck with a cracked windshield. I spent those years watching the same 6 building defects get missed by the same inadequate software over and over, so I built something better, in my garage, on weekends. I looked out at the room. The algorithm I patented in 2007 is now embedded in the assessment systems used by Fannie Mae, 3 regional insurance underwriters, and the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. If you financed or insured a home in the Southeast in the last 10 years, there's a reasonable chance my software touched your paperwork. The room had gone quiet. I say this not to impress you, but because there's something specific I want you to understand about the building where the Ashcroft Group operates. I opened my briefcase and placed a document on the podium. The land that building stands on has been leased from my holding company since 2004. Clause 11B of that lease allows recall in the event of documented fraud or conduct materially damaging to third-party lessees. I filed the recall this morning. I set the document flat. The commercial loan funding the Ashcroft Group's primary operations was acquired from SunTrust on Friday. I am now the note holder. and the building where the physician certifying my daughter-in-law's medical restrictions practices medicine. I acquired that lease this week as well. The room was absolutely still. Reginald had moved to the side of the stage. His face had gone the color of old concrete. "I'm not here to destroy anything," I said. "I'm here because a man in this room decided my son was useful enough to keep and not significant enough to respect. He offered him a director's title and handed him a chamois cloth. He used his daughter's pregnancy and a physician whose office building he controls to make sure my son had no way out." I took a breath. I want everyone in this room to understand something. A man can spend his whole life being patient and quiet and invisible. And the moment someone is cruel to someone he loves, all of that patience has to go somewhere. I stepped back from the podium. "Enjoy your evening." Reginald reached me before I got to the steps. "You can't do this," he said. His voice was stripped down, all the performance gone. "This is fraud. Read the lease," I said. "Your attorneys had it in their files for 20 years. You're a property assessor." He said it like it was an accusation. "I was," I said. "Now I'm your landlord." He grabbed my arm. "I will make sure your son never works in this city again." "Let go of my arm, Reginald. You think a software patent gives you the right to?" I said, "Let go." He didn't. I looked at the security guard standing nearby. A man whose staffing firm processed background checks using a system I'd verified ran my software, and I said evenly, "Would you please remove this man's hand from my arm?" The guard stepped forward. "Reginald, let go." I found my son at the coat check. He had heard everything. The room had heard everything. "Andre," I said, "take off the jacket." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he slipped off the catering jacket and let it fall over the counter. Underneath, he was wearing a plain white dress shirt. He already looked better. We walked out through the front doors together. Behind us, I could hear Reginald's voice rising, then faltering, then rising again like a signal losing its source. I didn't look back. My daughter-in-law didn't come home that night. She went to her father's house, which was, for the first time, not a comfortable place for either of them to be. 2 days later, sitting at my kitchen table with a lawyer present, my son was served with divorce papers. He read them, set them down, and said, "Okay." I looked at him. "Are you all right?" He thought about it genuinely, the way he does when he's being honest. "I think I've been living in a house and calling it a marriage," he said, "and I just got evicted." He picked up his coffee. "I think I'm okay, Dad." The baby was real. We found out later that the pregnancy was entirely healthy. The blood pressure elevation minor, the restrictions almost wholly manufactured from a single elevated reading that most physicians would have managed with a dietary change and a follow-up appointment. My son's attorney negotiated a custody agreement. The physician, facing questions about her lease arrangement and her documentation practices, chose to cooperate with the review rather than litigate it. Reginald Ashcroft still runs the Ashcroft Group, technically. He operates under a restructured agreement with a board that reads its contracts. His charity gala was not held this year. 6 weeks after the gala, my son called from a number I didn't recognize. "New phone?" I asked. "Knew everything," he said. "Dad, I enrolled in Emory's MBA program. Evening classes starts January." I set down my coffee. "I also found a position," he said. "Junior analyst at a community development finance institution. It's half what I made before. But it's..." A pause. "I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know." I sat in my kitchen in my paid-off house and looked out at the yard that hadn't changed much in 25 years. "I know you don't need anything," I said. "You could have told me," he said, "about what you built. I spent 2 years making myself smaller in that man's garage because I thought we had nowhere to go." "I know," I said. "I thought I was teaching you to value what you earn. What I was actually doing was leaving you without a map in someone else's territory. That's on me." "I'm not mad," he said. "I just wanted you to know that I know now." "Go to school," I said. "Call me Sunday." "Every Sunday," he said. "I still live in the same house. I still drive the Camry. I had the water heater replaced last spring. Did it myself, because old habits don't leave just because the bank account changes shape." There are a lot of Reginalds in this world. Men who read other people's patience as poverty, other people's restraint as weakness, who look at a man in a worn blazer and think they already know the whole story. The thing about spending 22 years looking at buildings for a living is that you learn the difference between load-bearing and decorative. The columns that look most impressive are usually the ones not holding anything up. The ones that matter are the ones nobody photographs. My son comes over most Sundays now. We eat breakfast. He tells me about his classes, about loan portfolios, about neighborhoods that development money can actually change if somebody cares enough to stay. He brought me a card last month. Handmade, which I didn't expect from a 31-year-old man. Inside it said, "You held the whole thing up, I just didn't know it." I taped it to the refrigerator. It's still there. If you've ever been written off because of what you were wearing or what you drove or what job title you held, you know the particular quiet of having more in your chest than the room knows about. You know what it costs to stay still, and you know that when that stillness finally ends, it doesn't end with a shout. It ends with paperwork and the right attorney on speed dial.